to build strength, what you're trying to do is to release growth hormone from the pituitary. That's controlled by eicosanoids. If you're a runner, you're trying to basically increase oxygen transfer to your muscle cells. That's controlled by eicosanoids. Single thing. If I can control my eicosanoids, whether I'm a distance runner or purely a bodybuilder, or some sport that requires a combination of pure strength or pure endurance, which is all other sports, then actually I have one diet that fits all sports. The only difference is that people who are strength athletes have more muscle mass and therefore require more protein and more carbohydrate and more fat than the endurance runner.
So when you get down, and I think it's your first book, when you get down to your target weight or body fat percentage, then you can introduce a little bit more fat in the diet?
Exactly. How do you know it's time to introduce more fat? When you can see your six-pack. Now, and most people say, I haven't seen that in probably about most of my adult life. So in that case, you've got just enough fat. Now, can you be too thin? Of course you can. So basically you use fat now as a ballast. And that's why the real key for athletic performance is not carbohydrate loading. It's fat loading. Fat loading of the muscle cells, because I can make chemical energy faster from fat inside the muscle cell than I can from carbohydrates.
Switching gears here on your anti-inflammatory zone book, you talk about silent inflammation. I guess most people probably have not heard of this term. Can you explain it and how it pertains to ill health, and also what your recommendation is for combating this silent inflammation?
Well, as we know more about inflammation, we know there's two types. There's the type that hurts. That's the obvious type. That's why you go see a doctor. But we also know there's a new type, a type that's below the perception of pain. The same inflammatory assault, but basically, since there's no pain, you do nothing to stop it. This is a kind of a slow attack on all of your organs that over time, whether it be the brain, the heart, or the immune system, if there's enough in-organ damage, we end up calling it heart disease, cancer, or Alzheimer's. So you say, I wish I had a test that could tell me years ahead of time that I'm already building up levels of inflammation in the body because I could reverse it. Now, is there any way you can look at a person to see if they're inflamed? No. Any more you can look at a person and know what their cholesterol levels are. You need a blood test. But this blood test will show up that you're already having high levels of silent inflammation decades before there's any damage. And even if you have damage, if you reverse the silent inflammation, you can now basically reduce the consequences of that disease state. Is there any drug known in the medical science that can do this? No. Only your diet.
What is that drug test? What is that
blood
test?
You're looking for the ratio of two fatty acids in the blood. One is called arachidonic acid, which is the building block of all of the hormones, the eicosanoids, that cause inflammation.
Are those called Series 2? Sometimes you see that in the
literature,
Series 2 prostaglandins, the bad ones that cause inflammation.
Exactly. And you're also looking for the ratio, again, to another fatty acid, an omega-3 fatty acid called EPA. That's a building block of many of these powerful anti-inflammatory. So you can see in your blood, you have the wheels of your fate, of your future, staring you in the face and say, I get it. If I could basically change the balance, I'll have less inflammation and more anti-inflammation. And what's the end result for me? I will live longer. I will live better. Now, let's take that example. Let's ask, who are the longest lived people in the world today? The Japanese. And if you look at their levels of these two fatty acids, they're about between 1.5 and 3. The typical American is about 15. So we're not only the fattest people on the face of the earth, we're the most inflamed. And that's why we spend so much on medical care, because we're basically fighting the enemy after the fact. The fact is, we're putting all the money when we see chronic disease, but it took decades to have that chronic disease develop. It's already starting, but you didn't know it because it was silent. But now we have the blood test. We can say, we can basically reverse this. How long? In about 30 days.
What is the response going to be from the primary care physician when this person may have heard this tape and said, I want my arachidonic acid to EPA ratio blood test? Are they going to look at them like they got three heads?
Of course, because this is not a standard test. It's a standard test used in academic research, but it's not a standard test you take.
Would they in fact do it?
No, they wouldn't, because they had nowhere to send it to. So we're looking, we're developing the test now, though we do it in a research basis, as a home-based test. that he can do it at home. Basically, we take a small finger prick, put it on a piece of paper, filter paper, send it to us. We analyze the data and tell you. And say, all of a sudden, you're back in control. See, the fact is, we have to realize physicians can be viewed as coaches. Coaches can't play the game. The bill